everyone. My name is Rashida Seshi. I'm the Chief People Officer and a partner of Africa Foresight Group. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Africa at Scale. Today is the second day of a two-day conference where African leaders get to discuss how to help African businesses scale. So this is something that we've been talking about since the beginning of this conference. How do we help businesses become global champions? It's more than just economic benefits and social benefits. I remember when I met the CEO and founder of AFG, Yasmin Kumi, in 2019. For the first time, we talked about the importance of African pride, and that's something she covered earlier. We all like to talk about large corporations, Coca-Cola, Facebook, and when we are associated with these companies, there is a sense of pride. And we don't know if Africans are able to do the same. Although we have large companies here, don't get me wrong. We spoke to the founder of one of such companies yesterday, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, but we need more of those companies. So we have great entrepreneurs joining us to discuss this topic today. Why is it important for Africa to have large corporations? I'll be handing over to the Happy Girl to take over the conversations. Hi, Happy Girl. Hello, can you hear us?
Hello, hi, can you see me?
Hello, Happy.
Hello, Rashida.
I think there's a bit of a technical problem. Hello, Happy, can you hear us now?
I can hear you very well, thank you. Can you see me and can you hear me well?
Thank you. Welcome to Africa at Scale. Thank you so much for joining us. Our audience, as well as the AFG team, we are looking forward to the very amazing conversation between you and the rest of the entrepreneurs. So please take it from here.
Thank you so much, Rashida. Hello, everyone. My name is Happy Girl Buthelezi, and I will be chairing today's very important session that will be answering the question, why scale as an African business? I work with the CDC as a coverage director for Africa with responsibilities for South Africa, Mozambique, Ghana. CDC is the UK's development finance institutions with the mandate to invest in growing businesses in Africa and South Asia to help build a better and more sustainable future for the continent and, more importantly, for its people. I have spent most of my career supporting some of the largest companies in Africa, expanding into other markets. And as part of that, I have worked and lived in Mozambique, Nigeria, the DRC, and Ethiopia. What motivates me about what I do at the CDC, and in fact, it's a story of my life since my time with Vodacom, is the opportunity to contribute to a meaningful change and help create jobs in Africa. And I am very excited to be part of the Africa at Scale 2020 and to be chairing this session. Joining me today are three entrepreneurs in Africa who are currently focusing on widening their international footprint. Our first guest is Chinezi Chijioke, co-founder and CEO of Nova Pioneer Education Group. After being a senior expert in education at McKinsey, Chinezi built Nova Pioneer 7 years ago and has grown it into a network of 13 schools operating in South Africa and Kenya. Nova Pioneer is scaling and aiming to operate schools across Africa. Secondly, we have Akin Wande Ademosu, CEO of Credit Direct Limited. Akin Wande, through Credit Direct, pioneered the unsecured micro-lending space in Nigeria and are in fact positioned to dominate the Nigerian market and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, my third and final guest is Tony Carr, who is the CEO of Starsight Power Utility. the leading off-grid provider in Nigeria. What can I say? Tony is a serial entrepreneur with extensive experience in developing operational businesses in emerging markets. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is home to more than 1.2 billion people and is set to grow this figure to more than 1.7 billion by 2030. On the other hand, we have about 400 companies with revenues beyond $1 billion US. Having said this, scaling in Africa is difficult. This is because our continent is fragmented, lacks infrastructure, and the cost of doing business across borders, it is very high, even though the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is expected to alleviate the latter. Irrespective of these constraints, scaling a business beyond a double-digit revenue size comes with organizational expansion challenges and the need for fundraising. Hence, there must be a deeply driven commitment to scale in order to successfully expand. In this conversation, we aim to explore the drivers behind business expansion. Today, we will get insight into what are the main drivers for our speakers' expansions and ambition, and how these have been accelerated or hampered by COVID-19. To start off our conversation, I will ask our guests to tell us in about 2 to 3 minutes each, what is the business case for Pan-African expansion compared to expanding globally? Chinezi, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, thanks, Abigail, for the introduction, for the prompt, and good to be part of this discussion, important discussion on scaling across Africa. I think for us, we view both the imperative and the case to scale across Africa, both from a purpose and a profit perspective. And so there is a mission imperative, mission case, and impact story we want to achieve as a school group. And we think having Pan-African scale is a way to really shift to solve a problem and to really improve things. I think has greater impact that way. It also has better impact for each individual child in our school if they have a network of like-minded what we call Noveneers, Nova Pioneer graduates all across the continent. So there's clearly an impact story, but that's part of our overall business case. But there's also a clear commercial case for it as well. And the clear commercial case for going across Africa is both or expanding across Africa is exposure to more growth environments, the exposure to more markets. We have generally major cities in each country. Very few countries that have multiple mega cities. South Africa being one country with multiple large cities, Nigeria being another. But it allows for greater scale, and it also allows for hedging risk across multiple. So that's sort of the Africa case. When the question of Africa or global, I think it depends on the business, and I think it depends on the entrepreneur. I think there are real business cases for some entrepreneurs who want to go global and say, if my solution is relevant globally, I can compete globally, I have access globally, I can access finance. There's a story there. But I think for a group like ours, we say we have unique access that global companies may not ability to succeed and operate in a way that gives us competitive advantage versus other global companies that may want to operate in multiple markets. So we have a real ability to deliver for a market that is absolutely growing, Pan-African. So you've got a growing market, or has been a growing market, I should say. Obviously, it's been impacted by COVID, clearly, but a growing income base to serve. And it's traditionally been harder to serve. And if you have the capacity to do that as an African business, an African entrepreneur, well, you have a relative speaking advantage for doing so. And so for us, it's guided by both the mission and the market opportunity. That's sort of driven our sense of why expand across Africa, as opposed to thinking about expanding to Europe, India, or other, whether it's developing or highly developed markets, expanding that's sort of a much further horizon for us.
Thank you, Shinezi. Tony, what are your thoughts on the same?
Thank you, Happy Girl. Thank you, everybody who's listening. I think I can pretty much echo many of the previous thoughts. I think that there's good reason for scale. We are predominantly Nigerian-centric, and we've only stepped out of Nigeria since January of this year. I think, particularly if you're working in local currency, it's important to have some diversification, because when we have a market shift in Africa, if we're in local currency, we certainly have a very large market shift. And if your inputs are in US dollars or euros, as is the case with Starsight, it's very difficult to absorb those shocks of the currency. Very interested in your comments on African Union. In effect, we've got ECOWAS, and I think ECOWAS does a great job in some regards, but it really doesn't help trade at all, right? If you have a business where you're importing assets into one ECOWAS country and you pay your duties, and then you move that asset to another ECOWAS country, you have to pay the duties again. So it doesn't really work as a trade group as such. At Starsight, we tend to leave our assets in the country of operation, so it's not a big issue. But I have previously experienced a business where we had large mobile assets, and just the concept of moving between different countries in a union didn't give you any cost savings at all, because you had to pay duties to each country, even though they were in a union. I think access to capital and local talent are the key to having a sustainable business. I think it's very hard to develop a business in Africa if you're not very well funded, because whatever you think will be the challenges, you need to times by 10 for the actual challenges. And most businesses that come to Africa, particularly from outside Africa, they have their rose-colored glasses on, and they really don't understand the risk and the impact of the shocks that you'll get, whether it's from changes in legislation, COVID, obviously, nobody's seen that coming. But I think it's important to have investors with a long-term view rather than, a short-term get-rich-quick scheme, because if it sounds too good to be true, there's every chance that it is too good to be true.
Thanks, Tony. And coming to you, Akin, what are your thoughts on what should be the drivers for a Pan-African business growth story?
Okay, so thank you, Happy Girl, for the privilege to be part of this conversation. The context for me is a bit different, and I like the mix of people in different, field. So the context for us for multinational expansion, it differs. We are, a Nigerian, pioneer consumer lending, and retail lending organization. We started about 13 years ago, and the business has been growing at, relatively double digits since we started over 13 years ago. And in that regard, with the exception of the times that you have season like this, turbulences will come, when you have to slow down and recalibrate your operation. It's been a model for us that we look at, and we continue to follow the trend. But one thing that I know is special about the environment that we're in, which is Nigeria, is that the market in that environment is very, very huge. And when you think about Africa as, as an entity, as a continent where opportunities, just is open to you, raising, across geography, it is not always the first option for us. A case in study was when we started thinking about how to expand, and we conducted the study to understand what the Africa market needs, as a value from a lending organization like us, and what other markets needs. We've seen that, the question that most of people keep asking is that, should I be the first mover in the new market, or should I be the fastest mover or the fast mover in the new market? And let me make reference to what John Maxwell said in one of his talk. He said, fast is faster than we've ever known it. And he said, forward is shorter, which means, therefore, that there's nothing that is new that you're doing. Someone is doing it somewhere. So there's a market that are extremely very competitive, and there's a market that are either underserved or unserved at all. So that becomes, where you want to pitch your tent. So for us, in my field, it was a question of what is the most, relevant value we need to bring in, to our stakeholders compared to what becomes the driver for revenue or performance. So, and we saw that, our analysis of the relevance of market still makes us to think that there's a lot we can do in the local markets than expanding multinationally. And we know that when we're leaving Nigeria, we're actually going to be considering, markets in other African countries, because that is where we think, demand is more relevant. And to wrap it up, there's also this balance that you have to create, your trade-offs. The upside of going into a new market when the risk is likely, higher. Some of other speakers have spoken about, everything around funding, the environment. And the other part of it is that you have to be able to pick your fight. Which one gives the best, return to your stakeholders? And those are parts of the consideration that I think must be in place before you take a leap, whether to go multinational or to stay Pan-African.
Thanks, Akin. So I guess with you in Nigeria, you do have the advantage of a very, very large market. So you would continue to be successful in your market still.
Yes, you can say that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Coming back to you, Tony, does a business need to do well in Africa before looking at global opportunities?
I don't think so. I think a lot of it depends on, where do you have your backing and your support? Very much comes back to your investors and which market they would like to drive you in. Certainly as the CEO of Starsight, I'd like to do lots of things, but I'm not really a one-man decision maker, in that I have a group of very seasoned shareholders that know the African market very well. I mean, between Helios and AIM, they're probably covering 40 to 50 countries across Africa. So I'm able to draw on their expertise on where we move next. Nigeria has a huge power deficit, so it makes sense for the business to have started in Nigeria. We're powering a lot of schools because, kids can't get educated if they don't have any power. There's no water in agriculture. There's, very little certainty of how many hours power you're going to get a day in Nigeria. I think if I compare that to South Africa, you have challenges in power, but you know exactly when you're not going to have power. And I think that makes it easier to plan in South Africa than Nigeria. Nigeria, we just know the power goes out. We don't know what time it's going to go out or when it's going to go out or how long it's going to be out for. So we've built a business on reliability. 99.9% power uptime, which in Nigeria is something that's very hard to find. And it's been well adapted by the education and the banking sector. And we're operating in every state. So we're not just focused on Lagos and Abuja. We're in every state of Nigeria. And, I'm proud to say that we do all of that with a Nigerian team. And I think that's key to building businesses in Africa. You must be able to access talent. And I think the talent we have in Nigeria, I'll be happy to carry to any country in the world.
Thank you, Tony. Just coming back to you, Chineze, I know you have schools now operating in Kenya, but you started in South Africa, and I'd like to say that you are successful in South Africa. What has been your experience in this regard? Did you first target to be successful in South Africa before moving on to Kenya and the other markets you are thinking of? And what has been your experience?
Yes. So I guess my first thought on that question is it's hard to imagine expanding to a new market if you're not successful in your first market. I can imagine there are very few businesses where you say it didn't work here, but there's a reason it's going to work better elsewhere. You're a pretty lucky entrepreneur if you get a second chance on that. So, pick your market. Now, it doesn't mean my first market had to be South Africa. I could have an export business where my market is the U.S. And I have a former colleague from McKinsey who started a pet food industry, and he's a pet food business, and he's selling into the U.S. That's his first market, but he's producing in South Africa, and so that's his market. Now, for us, we wanted to first build success, and learn in our first schools, but we did expand to Kenya before we had to. And that was driven by two things. We had a mission imperative, and we still have a mission imperative, to serve across the continent. We want to be south, east, west, eventually north and central too, right? And so we said in our first 10 years, we'd like to be in these three regions, serving these three regions. And that would be, we would also learn and demonstrate an ability to be able to successfully operate across multiple markets. So we said we're gonna have to prove that. Otherwise, because there are actually no school groups currently, besides our own, that operate growth platforms in multiple regions. You can be a collection of schools, but to actually be a growth platform in multiple regions, that hasn't been done. So we have to prove that. That's part of our core business plan and about something we have to demonstrate. And so we started that early. And so for us, that's what moved us to a second market before you could have said we were proven yet in South Africa. And now we have a greater track record. We have a greater sort of sense of having demonstrated ourselves in South Africa. But at the time we expanded to Kenya, we didn't, and we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. And so I think our logic was driven by both that we had to get there, and we sort of, as part of our initial sort of business rollout. I will say just on this is, in some ways, I think the question is less about can one do it or should one do it. I think the intriguing or like tough problem-solving questions are, first, for a board would say, why are you doing it? is there a real good rationale for why you're doing it? And then secondly, how do you do it? And I think Tony was mentioning, operating multiple regions, there's a reason there are not very many multi-region growth companies, enterprises, and in most sectors across the continent. And that's because it's a difficult operating task. And so for us, it was really about solving that how that made us do it earlier rather than later.
Thank you, Chinezi. Just coming back to Akin. Akin, how has COVID-19 changed the angle on business scaling for African companies?
Okay, thank you for the question. So a few things will come into play in this regard. Tony and Chinezi, they've talked about some angle of it. Because the system didn't just start when COVID started. The system has been around, so there's a lot of adoption that you need to do. So, thanks for those comments. So personally, I think the answer to how you start or where you start from actually sits at the core of what you become after a crisis. So the pandemic did not create the world for us. It came to meet us in the world and it's going to leave us and continue, and the business will continue. So this season has forced many businesses that, from my perspective, to reevaluate and rediscover their core, because if you're not anchored well before COVID, you're likely going to be in a different venture at this moment. You're looking for something else to do. So with respect to your operating models, the strategic positioning, the core of your enterprise, if those things are not well situated, even thinking about scaling is not going to be part of what you do now. Either you're cleaning house or you're looking for what else to do. So, but for Credit Direct, the relevance for us has been that, technology has been a thing that we started investing in long before COVID. We saw that the future is digital. So we were investing in technology. But what COVID has done is to fast track and reprioritize, our options. So now we've seen that, since the world, before in Africa, we're thinking that, adoption of technology is going to be a problem. People will not be able to use, smartphone and all that. And that adoption rate has just spiked now. So the customer taste has changed. The way of expectation of delivery of products has changed. So systematically, you have to, fast track your process of, intervention or process of deployment of your channels. And that's what we have done in our own local markets. And in speaking to that as well, the crisis by any means has been, a means of rediscovery of other opportunities, because there are some markets that we're not playing so heavily in before the crisis. So now our business is moving so further into the northern part of Nigeria, because before now we thought religion, culture would be a setback, but there's a demand for new things. So for me, the opportunity that is opening at this particular season is more about, collaborative opportunity, capability expansion, systemic, redefinition, and also for everyone to re-examine where else the gap is existing now. So COVID has changed the model of delivery of service, which must be anchored on the core of your organization. That for me has been the major changes that I've seen.
Thank you so much, Akin. And staying with the impact of COVID-19, Chinezi, as a parent myself, I am very keen to hear the educators' view on how those Zoom classes are going, because I am done. But I'm very keen to hear from your side as an educator, as well as an operator of this business, how has that changed the way that you are running the schools?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're not alone. I think one of the benefits, I think a lot of folks, for those of us who wear parent hats, have greater appreciation for those who wear teacher hats. And so there's a coming together of parents and teachers around their children. At the same time, I think for us as educators, we have a huge appreciation for for our parents and how parents and families have shown up during this time. Our mantra since day one was nothing stops Noveneer learning, and so no matter what, we want students to learn. Now the data that I'm previously aware of around the efficacy of sort of virtual-based learning has not been encouraging on a large scale. And you've seen global data that shows real drop-offs in student achievement and student learning growth as a result of it. And that's even among students who have tech access, let alone the many students who don't. So the question is really how have we tried to adapt? And I think we have tried to make sure, first of all, every student is able to continue learning throughout the Noveneer throughout the time, and that literally started on day one. Now we were fortunate, I think, relative to a number of other individual schools or even school groups, in that we have a central learning design team, and so a lot of our learning design is supported by that. And so we were able to pivot literally within 24 hours to have every child in the learning program supported. Now, of course, we weren't at our best to start, and part of this has been we've had to learn. So week by week, in week 2, we were better than we were in week 1. And week 3, we're better than week 2. And you could see the number of the parent frustration go down from week 2 to week 4, because finally the school was understanding how much time do I have or not have? How's my child able to interact on Zoom? And now we're at a point where, our teachers have been amazing. We're at a point where teachers are doing teaching both online and in the classroom at the same time in a way that is joyful and in a way that is enriching, in a way that we can assess student growth, and we're seeing students growing. And so I think a lot of that adaptation has been to start and get better each week, adapting to what has been an incredible amount of shift. Sort of weekly, monthly, between going to school, staying home, going to school, staying home. So Abigail, you're not alone as a parent. I hope we've gotten better at serving parents like you, and most of all, I hope we've gotten better at ensuring our students are growing. And I really think we have, and because of sort of the commitment and dexterity that our teachers have really had demonstrated this year.
Thank you. You're very correct to say that week 1, was a lot worse than where we are today.
Exactly.
Yeah. parting shot to my guests, and I'm going to ask you to do exactly 1 minute each, just to try and answer this question for our audience. What is the one driving factor that helps to decide where to go next geographically as an African company? Maybe let me start with you, Tony, and I'll come to Akin and lastly to Chinezi.
I think for Starside, we're driven by where is the need, and where is the skill work base, and most importantly, affordability. You can't build a business that's built around power unless people can afford to pay for power. And I'm a big supporter of all of the funding that goes into rural electrification and everything else. But unfortunately, I'm not a believer in it's sustainable if it's not economically viable. So I think businesses need to be able to operate without grant funding. I think grant funding is a great enabler, but I don't believe it's the answer to fixing the power problem in Africa.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. And your thoughts, Akin?
Okay, so I'll look at it from these angles, because this is a business perspective. There are 5 things that we look at as an organization, and I believe any organization, if you want to expand or grow or scale, there are things that happen naturally, but scaling doesn't happen naturally. So you have to be deliberate and be able to name your drivers. The drivers of your growth. For my organization, and I know for different organizations, those will be different. We know about people, which is very critical. People say that great people develop into great leaders, develop great organization. So when you empower people and you give them the freedom to fail at least one time, it's a good thing. The organization support system, the driving forces behind the system, the technology and everything that has to do with your system. Your financial models, the models of your finance is very critical. The other thing is the market size and the potential of where you're thinking about. And also the local environment or governance, what we call the cultural fit. But if you ask me to pick one of those, one man once said, it's a culture will eat your, strategy for lunch. So I think cultural fit becomes the most critical of all the options. If there's no fit, there's nothing you do that will work.
Wow, that's very interesting, Akin. Thank you. Chinezi, your parting shot on the subject?
Yeah, my
one driver.
Yeah, my intellectual answer to that was going to be actually 2 words: market and mission. But in reflection, that's not my answer, because our market and mission was going to take us to Nigeria before Kenya. That was the initial intent. That was our strategy and our plan. And it came down to team. We identified a team in Kenya that had a like-minded passion for the mission, good cultural fit to the point that Kim mentioned, and had an intention. And I think businesses that are successful have to be locally led and have to have local entrepreneurial ownership. And so we partnered up. It wasn't an acquisition. It wasn't a launch team. We merged and said, okay, we're going to be, one mission, 2 geographies. And so ultimately we made that decision based on team. And frankly, it was of the many decisions that have gone wrong versus gone well in the time of leading Nova Pioneer, it was absolutely one of the best decisions we've made. And so my one answer would be where you have the team to lead.
Thank you to our speakers. This has been very insightful. I think we'll now take some questions from our audience. Do we have any questions?
Friday afternoon, happy girl.
Rashid, thanks, Tony. I agree. We're all tired from the very, exciting week that we've had at Africa at Scale 2020. Do we have any questions, Rashid? So I think my eyes are failing me. I'm going to have to come very close to the screen. So there's a question for Chinezi. How should African companies orientate themselves from the start in order to enhance their prospect of expanding globally?
It's a great question. in order to expand globally. If I was setting up a company that had a that had an intention of global expansion from the beginning, I think I would start by understanding the market, making sure that I'm solving a problem that's relevant to those markets, right? And I would quite soon decide, first of all, do I need to prove my product locally, or can I just go globally? Like, because if the market's different, why not go to the market you want to serve? Another good example is Paga. Paga is a company in Nigeria. It started in Nigeria. It's mobile money. It's now expanding globally to Mexico and other markets, because they've identified now, how do they do it? I think they identified to solve their problem that has global relevance, and they have a team that has literally globally competitive skill. So if you're not going to have a team that's going to be able to compete and deliver service that's competitive globally, whether it's cost competitive or service level competitive, then you're really going to struggle. So I think I would start quite early identifying, is the problem I'm solving relevant to which global markets? And if it is, great. When do I sequence it? Is it first? Is it second? What do I need to do to get there? And then I would make sure my team has the capacity to deliver on that. I have, there are many permutations. Do you want to have an Africa cost base and a global market? That'd be great, potentially. Tony was talking about the financial resources you need. Do you want to have global shareholders who can support you to go global? Those feel like important questions that would come next phase. I think my first problem solving would be understanding, is what I'm doing a problem I'm really solving that's globally relevant, and do I have a team that can deliver? Do I have a team with a skill level that can deliver on that challenge?
Very true. I couldn't agree more, Chinezi. There's a question for Akin. Again, my apologies. I'm going to have to come to the screen because my eyes are failing me. But the question for you, Akin, is what is the best trade-off between doing well at home and looking at Pan-African or global expansion? So someone is putting you on the spot here.
Okay, good. Good question as well. Best trade-off, I think is about, Chijioke mentioned mission, and the purpose for which you're set up. One thing that I know is critical, because I've said this over and over again, there is a gap in the continent that we know that, unless we step up to fill that gap, the emerging population will struggle because the current population is struggling. At 1.2, we're extremely struggling. Nigeria poverty level has surpassed that of India. So it's a crisis at home. So you have to, whichever way you think about it, your mastery, your capability, your honing, your skills has to happen from somewhere. So we have a market to capture. So there's just so much opportunity in the environment, and you have stakeholders, and there are many bricks and blocks that build you to becoming the organization that you are. And so your mission must drive you. There's a lot in Africa. There's a lot in Africa, in Nigeria. So when we did our study of the potential of the market, we just realized that looking at the entire East Africa and South Africa, we thought Ghana, that is so close to Nigeria, should have the semblance of culture and faith with Nigeria. But our finding showed that South Africa actually, when it comes to markets, has more semblance with Nigeria consumer appetite in my own field than Ghana, than the closest organization to us. And when we think about it, why don't you look at where the potential is highest for you and where you can scale better to reach more people? And we just realized that in the local environment, there is a huge need for people that are underserved and unserved in the market that I'm in. So for me, it's going to be mission driven. It's going to be value against valuation, because for some people, it's let's chase valuation and that's why they expand. For us, it's about what gives value and impact the lives of the people than other things. So those considerations must be in place before you take the step.
Thank you so much, Akin. That makes perfect sense. There are many questions, but I think I'm going to leave this very last one to Tony. Tony, what is the inherent strengths of African companies what inherent strengths of African companies can be leveraged to expand more successfully into emerging markets?
I think without a doubt, it's the human capital. You know, the human capital we have. You know, Nigeria has, like, from a tech resource, there's just every street corner's got a tech expert of some description, but he's got no access to market. He's got no access to capital. So how we go about enabling those groups, you know, there's people doing great work like CC Hub, who are, you know, getting these guys onto the first run of the ladder to get them some exposure. And I think moving these people around, Nigeria is a huge economy, as you know, moving them around the country as Akin is doing, like selling to different parts of Nigeria, is just exactly the same as selling to a different country. In fact, there's probably bigger variations between Kano and Lagos than what there is between Lagos and Cape Town. It really is that level of variation and language. And, you know, we're lucky in Nigeria, we have a diverse community that are used to dealing with people with differing views, and the ability to navigate those differing views to reach a common goal is critical if you're going to step outside your current environment.
Thank you so much, Tony. And thank you all for all your questions. There are a lot of questions that we couldn't go through today, but if you think of more questions after this session, please submit your questions in the community wall on the conference app. Thank you all to our speakers and the audience for an enlightening conversation on the drivers behind business expansion in Africa. I have really enjoyed my time with the speakers and the audience today. My conversation with you and the attendees doesn't end here. I hope to interact more with you via the conference app. Enjoy the rest of your time at Africa at Scale. And I think I'm going to hand back to Rashida, who is live at the Africa at Scale studio. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Happy. Thank you. That was a great conversation. As we all heard, you need to strike the balance between value and valuation. I want to use this opportunity to thank the rest of our speakers, Chinezi, Tony, and Akiwande. We really appreciate your time, and we thank you very much for answering the questions by our audience, for driving such an engaging conversation. It's really been a pleasure. I would like for the rest of you to remind you that we still have more program for you today. Next, we're going to look at unlocking Africa's global potential through gender lens investing. We have a very amazing team joining us from across Africa, including my colleague Yasmin Kumi, to discuss how to improve gender-less financing in Africa. Why is it so important for it to finance female-led businesses in Africa? Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.